All right, the Dexter dynamic and narcissism. What do we mean? So, Dexter is an excellent case study because he has a elaborate facade, right? The CSI tech, and he has the core prime aim drive that he believes is his real self, which is the serial killer Dexter. And how do you tell one for the other, and how does it really apply to narcissism? And while narcissists aren't really killers, they are emotional destroyers, right? They're and it's not always they don't always cross the line into illegality, but it's emotionally dysfunctional, not only for themselves but for their partners, really the targets they take, the livestock they feed upon, the toys they play with, however you want to frame it. So it's an excellent case study and exploration. And the show also has excellent words to describe narcissistic dynamics. So Dexter called his serial killer drive to be the dark passenger, right? And on a PG level, the narcissist you could call the narcissistic drive a dark passenger as well. Like they're not looking for a physical body count; they're looking for an emotional body count. Because people that are psychologically broken are more easily to control, and therefore provide a sense of stability and a sense of esteem through your power over them. Another frame is the will to power. So that is a good word for it. So if you call a narcissist, and this is somebody that's trying to self-correct, so there are people with narcissistic traits that they know become overly expressed and cause destructiveness to their life. You could call your narcissism dark passenger. You could review this piece of art in Dexter and see your own development through the character evolution. But also see his limitations, right? So the drive actually made him very powerful, right? So it caused him to have different martial arts skills and a discipline. And this is not unlike the narcissistic drive, right? They study their victims months ahead of time. They evolve themselves to present themselves to be the perfect partner. It's a great discipline. It's a great challenge, albeit ultimately destructive to all parties involved. But it is nonetheless some kind of growth, some kind of evolution, and but driven by a dark addiction. So the two selves really establish each other and kind of are at war with each other. A lot of times, I've seen this more and more where the CSI Dexter in the narcissism role takes on the role of the helper, right? So you'll get therapists expressing narcissistic behaviors. You get social workers, etc. Spiritual people, posing as spiritual advisors, because that's how that's a great access point for empaths, right? So for the ideal victims, the ideal food sources are people that have codependent tendencies. So you want access to that, you get access to these kind of fields, these helper fields, the empath trends, because you have coworkers that are empaths, you have people coming to you that are empaths as well, that are sensitive, and so now you're getting closer to your fuel supply, um, or narcissistic supply, as I say. So So let's explore a case study though. The so let's talk about like the Dexter formation and how narcissism can be compartmentalized. Even I would submit. So I had a client that had a narcissistic partner, and it was a female, so male to female, female narc, and basically you have the evolution of the narcissistic trend and that cycle repeating and deepening itself, starting around 13, right? So this is a female narc evolving from a masculine narc, right? So a male father narc, the female reflecting it back to herself. So the father was overt and she was a covert. And that's probably just how they saw themselves to be more effective at achieving the prime aims of narcissism. So they that so the repetition of history is really she loved her partners the way her father loved her, and it is a punch in the gut as far as awareness of this stuff. Um, but it's important to point out that history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it rhymes, right? So her father loved as an overt, loved using air quotes. I mean, they fed romantically. As an overt narcissist, she fed romantically as a covert, and there was that bifurcation, right? That two selves. Now, when I talk about compartmentalization and different expressions, so one thing that can interrupt a narcissist pattern from becoming a whole identity is them waking up at an early age and recognizing this is something they don't want, right? So even though she repeated her behavior as far as loving her male partners like her father loved her, she transferred the narcissism into her romantic relationship because that's the first real role that evolved out the gates. um, but she recognized it as dysfunctional and did not repeat it in her child. So and so while the narcissistic feeding was on one kind of life, right, the Dexter Morgan uh, you know, tight knit shirt killer mode. Her motherhood or even profession was as crime scene investigator, right? The donut handing out Dexter. Uh, um, and that was the facade. But also, these are competing elements in themselves, right? So the and a lot of times this happens when you have a big life rule change, right? That can doesn't mean they you can even choose not to have your narcissism express into that role. Suffering helps as well to arrest the development of the full consumption of the narcissistic pattern. So this client's narc lost a child, and the pain of that can prevent a full mask takeover, which I've seen in people with near death experiences. Right, you have a loosening of the mask. So there's different mitigating factors that can really cause that compartmentalization. But it doesn't even have to be that extreme. A lot of times, the covert narcissist will only show their mask slip in their intimate partners, and they'll be nice to everybody else. and be pleasant to everybody else in order to maintain the facade. And on they go, on to the next partner. And they really limit it to that. The partner's narcissist, I mean, it always has these different manifestations, which are fascinating. So, like, her feeding behavior was on people that she thought were losers, that she didn't think were going anywhere anyway. So you might as well feed upon them, and was the justification. Well, what are you justifying that? There is a latent moral sense being submitted through another role. So, very interesting dynamics, almost Dexter-esque, where he would only feed on criminals, right? So she'd only feed on who she perceived as losers. And that is the Dexter dynamic as expressed in narcissism. Thanks for listening.